For 16 years, Vivian Jenna Wilson kept a secret about her father, Elon Musk, the billionaire who builds rockets and electric cars, the man millions admire or criticize but few truly know. Tonight, that secret ends. In 2008, when Vivian was just 4 years old, her father made her a promise. A promise so important that she held onto it through years of feeling invisible, through the pain of coming out as transgender, through the heartbreak of rejection. But Elon Musk forgot that promise, or maybe he chose to forget. Now Vivian is breaking her silence. She's telling the world what really happened between them, not the story you've read in headlines, not the version her father has told in interviews. The truth. This is the story of a daughter who needed to be seen and a father who couldn't see her. It's about a promise made on the darkest night and broken in the brightest spotlight. It's about what happens when you finally speak up after staying silent for too long. And it all started on one June evening in Los Angeles, when Vivian's hands shook as she prepared to post words that would change everything. Vivian Jenna Wilson's hands shook as she held her phone. Outside her apartment window in Los Angeles, the June sun was setting. The sky turned orange and pink, but she barely noticed. Her eyes stayed fixed on the empty text box on her screen. She had typed and deleted the same words 20 times today, maybe 30. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Should she really do this? Should she really tell the world her secret? Just press send, she whispered to herself. Just do it. But it wasn't that simple. Nothing about her life had ever been simple. Vivian was 20 years old. She lived in a small apartment near the University of California campus. Most people walking past her on the street had no idea who she was. They didn't know her father was one of the most famous men on earth. They didn't know she had grown up in mansions. They didn't know that her last name used to be Musk. And they definitely didn't know the secret she was about to share. She set down her phone and walked to her tiny kitchen. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. She could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on Wilshire Boulevard. She poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. On her kitchen table sat a stack of old photos. She had pulled them from a box in her closet that morning. Photos from when she was little. Birthday parties, family trips, pictures from a time before everything fell apart. One photo showed her at age 4, smiling at the camera. She was wearing a SpaceX t-shirt. Her father stood behind her, distracted, looking at his phone even as the picture was taken. That was how she remembered him. Always there, but never really there. Another photo showed her twin brother Griffin. They had been born together on April 15, 2004 in Orange County, California. Born through IVF because her parents had struggled after losing their first baby, Nevada, to sudden infant death. The grief from that loss had hung over their family like a dark cloud, even though Vivian was too young to remember Nevada. She picked up the photo that hurt the most. It was from 2008. She was 4 years old, sitting in a big leather chair in her father's home office. The office had been in their mansion in Bel Air, back when Mom and Dad were still married. In the photo, she was tiny, drowning in that huge chair, but smiling. She remembered that day. Dad had let her sit in his chair and pretend to be the boss of Tesla. She had drawn pictures of rocket ships while he worked. For those few hours, she had felt special. She had felt seen. That photo was taken just days before the night that changed everything. The night her father made her a promise. The night she would never forget, even though he apparently had. Vivian set down the photo and walked back to where her phone lay on the couch. She had to do this. She had been silent for too long. The world knew the official story. In 2022, when she turned 18, Vivian had legally changed her name and gender. Court documents filed in Los Angeles County Superior Court told part of the truth. She had stated she wanted to change her name because of her gender identity and because she no longer wished to be related to her biological father. The media had covered it. Headlines screamed, "Elon Musk's daughter cuts ties." Trans daughter rejects billionaire father. Family fracture in the Musk dynasty. But no one knew the real story. No one knew about that night in October 2008. No one knew about the promise. No one knew why it hurt so much when he broke it, until now. Vivian picked up her phone again. Her heart pounded in her chest. She opened her social media app and began to type. This time, she didn't delete the words. "I want to tell you something about my father that no one talks about," she wrote. Her finger paused over the send button. Once she posted this, there was no taking it back. The whole world would read it. Her father would read it. Her siblings would read it. Millions of strangers would have opinions about her life, her pain, her family. But staying silent hadn't protected her. Staying silent had only made the hurt grow bigger, deeper, impossible to ignore. She thought about last month. She had been scrolling through news articles when she saw it. Her father in an interview talking about his children. He had said he lost a son to what he called the woke mind virus. He used her old name, the name she had left behind when she transitioned, the name that had never felt like hers. He had told his version of their story to the world. He had made her pain about his beliefs, his politics, his crusade against what he saw as cultural problems. He had erased her, made her invisible again. That's when Vivian knew she had to speak, not to hurt him, not to get revenge, but to be seen. To be heard, to reclaim her own story. She continued typing. In 2008, when I was 4 years old, my father made me a promise. It was October and his life was falling apart. Tesla was almost bankrupt. SpaceX had just failed for the 3rd time. He was divorcing my mom. He had lost almost everything. That night, I found him crying in his office. I had never seen him cry before. I climbed into his lap, and he made me a promise that I held onto for years. A promise that gave me hope when I came out as transgender. A promise that broke my heart when he couldn't keep it. I'm going to tell you what he promised me, but first, I need to tell you our story. The real story, not the one in headlines or biographies. The story of what it's like to be the child no one sees, even when your father is the most watched man on earth. Vivian took a deep breath. Her thumb hovered over the send button one more time. "For you, little Xavier," she whispered, using the name she once had. "You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be seen." She pressed send. The post went live. Within seconds, the first likes appeared, then comments, then shares. Vivian set down her phone and closed her eyes. There was no going back now. The truth was out in the world, spreading like wildfire across the internet. She had finally broken her silence. And somewhere in Austin, Texas, in a mansion she had never visited, her father's phone was probably buzzing with notifications. He would read what she wrote. He would see that she remembered. The question was, did he remember too? Or had that promise made on the worst night of his life been forgotten like so many other moments with his children, lost in the noise of rockets and factories and the endless pursuit of the future? Vivian would tell the world about that promise. But not yet. First, they needed to understand how she got here. They needed to understand why it mattered so much. They needed to understand what it meant to be invisible in plain sight. Vivian's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She had posted her message less than an hour ago, and already thousands of people were reading it, sharing it, commenting on it. But she couldn't look at the responses yet. Not now. Instead, she needed to go back to the beginning, back to before she was born, back to the tragedy that shaped everything. She opened her laptop and began typing the next part of her story. "To understand my family, you need to know about the brother I never met," she wrote. Nevada Alexander Musk was born in 2000 in Orange County, California. Vivian had seen only a few pictures of him, a tiny baby with dark hair, her parents' first child. Their first miracle, he lived for only 10 weeks. Sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, the nightmare every parent fears. One moment your baby is sleeping peacefully. The next moment they're gone, no warning, no explanation, just gone. Vivian had learned about Nevada when she was 8 years old. She had asked her mother why there were no pictures of Mom pregnant before the twins were born. Her mother, Justine, had sat her down in their house in Los Angeles and told her the truth. "You had an older brother," Mom had said, tears in her eyes. "His name was Nevada. He died when he was very small. It was the worst thing that ever happened to your father and me." Even at 8, Vivian understood that Nevada's death had changed her parents. The grief had been too heavy. They dealt with it in different ways. Dad threw himself into work, into SpaceX and Tesla, into building things that would last forever because his son couldn't. Mom tried to hold the family together, but the cracks were already showing. After Nevada died, Mom and Dad used IVF to have more children. They couldn't bear the thought of another natural pregnancy, another risk. So in 2004, Vivian and her twin brother Griffin were born. Then came triplets in 2006, Kai, Saxon, and Damien. 3 more boys, 5 children in 2 years, all through IVF. Vivian paused her typing and looked at another old photo. This one showed all 5 Musk children in 2008. They were standing in front of a Christmas tree in their Bel Air mansion. The mansion sat high in the hills, with views of all of Los Angeles spread out below. From the outside, it looked perfect. A beautiful home, a big family, a father who was becoming famous for building electric cars and rocket ships. But Vivian remembered what it felt like inside that house. Empty, quiet. Dad was almost never there. She remembered the mansion had 12 bedrooms, but Dad only slept there a few nights a month. He slept at the Tesla factory in Fremont, California, 2 hours north, or at the SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, just south of Los Angeles. He worked 20 hours a day, maybe more. He was trying to change the world, trying to save the planet, trying to make humans a multi-planetary species. But he was missing his children growing up. Vivian remembered waiting by the front door every evening around 6 o'clock. That's when Dad said he would come home for dinner. She would sit on the marble floor of the entryway, playing with toy cars, waiting to hear his Tesla pull into the driveway. Sometimes he came home at 7, sometimes 8. Sometimes not at all. When he did come home, he would walk in still typing on his phone. He would hug the kids quickly, distracted, his mind somewhere else. At the SpaceX launch pad in Cape Canaveral, Florida, at the Tesla assembly line, in meetings with engineers and investors. "How was school?" he would ask. Vivian would start to tell him about the picture she drew or the book she read, but his phone would ring. "Hold on, sweetheart. I have to take this. It's important." Everything was important. Everything except the little girl trying to tell her daddy about her day. Dinner was the same. Dad would sit at the head of the long dining table, eating quickly while scrolling through emails. Mom would try to start conversations about the kids' activities, but Dad's responses were short, distracted. "Uh-huh, that's good. Great job." He wasn't really listening. Vivian could tell. She was only 4, 5, 6 years old, but she could tell when someone was really paying attention and when they were just pretending. Dad was always pretending. The only time he seemed fully present was when he talked about his work. Then his eyes would light up. He would stand from the table and start pacing, talking fast about rocket engines and battery technology and self-driving cars. "We're going to Mars," he would say, his voice full of excitement. "You kids are going to see humans living on another planet. Isn't that amazing?" Vivian's brothers would get excited too. They loved hearing about rockets and space, but Vivian just wanted Dad to ask her about her art project. She wanted him to read her a bedtime story. She wanted him to be amazed by her, not by Mars. She felt guilty for feeling that way. How could she compete with saving the world? How could her little life matter when Dad was working on things that would help all of humanity? But she was just a kid. And kids need their parents to think they're the most important thing in the world, at least sometimes. The marriage fell apart slowly, then all at once. Vivian was too young to understand the details, but she felt the tension. Mom and Dad fighting behind closed doors. Mom crying in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. Dad staying away even more than before. In September 2008, everything exploded. Mom and Dad sat all the kids down in the living room of the Bel Air house. Vivian was 4 years old. She sat between her twin brother Griffin and her younger brother Kai. "Your mother and I are getting a divorce," Dad said. His voice was flat, like he was giving a business presentation. Vivian didn't know what divorce meant, but she knew it was bad from the way Mom was crying. "What's divorce?" Griffin asked. "It means Dad is going to live in a different house," Mom explained. "But we both still love you very much. That will never change." But it did change. Everything changed. Dad moved out that week. He took an apartment closer to the SpaceX factory. Vivian and her siblings stayed with Mom in the Bel Air house, but it felt different now. Emptier, sadder. Dad visited on weekends when he could. But 2008 was the worst year of his business life. Tesla was running out of money. The company was weeks away from bankruptcy. SpaceX had failed to launch successfully 3 times in a row. If the 4th launch failed, SpaceX would die too. Vivian didn't understand any of that. She just knew that Dad was even more distracted now, even more stressed, even more absent. She remembered one visit in October 2008. Dad came to take the kids to dinner, but he was on his phone the entire time. They went to a restaurant on Sunset Boulevard, and Dad sat at the table typing emails while the kids ate chicken fingers and French fries. "Dad, watch this," Kai said, trying to balance a spoon on his nose. "That's great, buddy," Dad said, not looking up. "Dad, I learned a new song at school," Vivian said. "Want to hear it?" "Maybe later, sweetheart. I'm in the middle of something important." Vivian felt the familiar sting. Not important enough. Never important enough. After dinner, Dad dropped them back at Mom's house. He hugged them quickly and drove away, already on another phone call. That night, Vivian couldn't sleep. She had a bad dream about Dad disappearing forever, flying away to Mars and never coming back. She woke up crying. Mom wasn't home. She had gone out with a friend. The nanny was downstairs watching TV. Vivian got out of bed and walked through the big, dark house. She didn't want the nanny. She wanted Dad. And then she saw light coming from his old office. The room Mom hadn't cleared out yet. Vivian walked closer and heard something that made her freeze. Dad was there, and he was crying. She had never heard her father cry before. She peeked through the crack in the door and saw him sitting at his desk, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Something made her push open the door and walk inside. "Daddy," she whispered, "why are you sad?" Her father looked up, and Vivian saw something she had never seen in his eyes before. He looked broken, lost, human. What happened next would change everything. Vivian stood in the doorway of the office, her small, bare feet cold on the hardwood floor. The room was dark except for the glow of her father's computer screen. Outside the windows, Lowe's Angels sparkled with a million lights, but inside this room, everything felt dark and heavy. Elon Musk looked at his 4-year-old daughter, and for a moment he didn't try to hide his tears. He didn't wipe his face or pretend everything was fine. He just sat there broken while his little girl watched. "Daddy," Vivian said again, her voice tiny in the big room. "Are you okay?" He shook his head slowly. "No, sweetheart, I'm not okay." Vivian walked closer. She had never seen her father like this. He was always strong, always busy, always confident. But now he looked small, even though he was sitting in that big leather chair. "Why are you crying?" she asked. "Everything is falling apart," he said quietly. His voice was rough, like his throat hurt. "My companies are dying. Your mother and I are divorced. I'm failing at everything that matters." Vivian didn't understand words like companies or failing, but she understood sadness. She climbed up onto his lap, which wasn't easy because the chair was so big and she was so small. But she made it, and she wrapped her little arms around his neck. "Don't be sad, Daddy," she whispered. And then Elon Musk did something he almost never did. He held his daughter close and really hugged her. Not a quick, distracted hug while checking his phone. A real hug. He pressed his face against her hair and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that was spinning out of control. They sat like that for a long time. Vivian could feel his heart beating fast. She could feel him taking deep breaths, trying to calm down. Finally, he spoke. "I'm sorry, Vivian." "For what?" "For not being here more, for always working, for missing so much of your life." His voice cracked. "You're growing up and I'm not paying attention. Tesla is going bankrupt. SpaceX just failed for the third time. We're out of money. I've lost everything. And the worst part is, I've been so focused on trying to save the companies that I forgot what really matters." "What really matters?" Vivian asked. "You," he said. "You and your brothers, you matter more than rockets, more than cars, more than anything." Vivian felt warm inside. She had waited so long to hear those words. "I want to make you a promise," Dad said. He pulled back slightly so he could look at her face. His eyes were red from crying, but they were focused on her, really focused. For the first time in forever, she had his complete attention. "What promise?" she asked. "I promise that no matter what happens, no matter how big the company gets, no matter how famous I become, no matter how busy I am, I will always make time to really listen to you, really see you, really pay attention to who you are." Vivian's eyes got wide. "Really?" "Really, because that's what matters most. Not rockets, not cars, not money or fame or changing the world. You and your brothers, my children, that's what's important." "But you're always working," Vivian said. Even at 4, she knew this was true. "I know," Dad said. "And that's been wrong. I've been so scared of failure, so scared of letting down the people who believe in me, the people who invested their money, that I forgot about the people who need me most. My own kids." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm probably going to lose Tesla," he continued. "SpaceX might die too, but even if I lose everything else, I don't want to lose you. I don't want to wake up one day and realize my kids grew up and I missed it. I don't want you to be a stranger to me." Vivian held his face in her small hands. "I'm not a stranger, Daddy, I'm me." He laughed, a sad sound. "You're right, you're you, and I promise to see you, really see you. Not the version of you I want you to be. Not some perfect daughter who loves rockets and engineering, but exactly who you are, whoever that turns out to be." "What if I don't like rockets?" Vivian asked. "Then you don't like rockets and that's okay. I'll love you anyway." "What if I like art instead?" "Then I'll come to every art show." "What if I'm different from my brothers?" "Then I'll celebrate how special and unique you are." Vivian smiled. "Promise." "I promise, father to child. This is a real promise. Will you help me remember? If I forget, if I get too busy again and stop paying attention, will you remind me?" Vivian nodded seriously. "I promise, Daddy, I'll remind you." "Good," he kissed her forehead. "I love you exactly as you are. Never ever forget that. No matter what happens, no matter how much time passes, I love you for who you really are." "I love you too, Daddy." They sat together in that office for another hour. Dad didn't check his phone once. He held Vivian and told her stories about when he was a little boy in South Africa. He told her about his own father who had been cold and distant. He told her he wanted to be different, better. "I don't want to be like my dad," he said. "I want to be the kind of father who sees his kids, really sees them." Eventually, Vivian fell asleep in his arms. When she woke up the next morning, she was in her own bed. She thought maybe she had dreamed the whole thing. But then she saw Dad's SpaceX jacket draped over her chair. He had left it there for her. She held the jacket and smiled. Dad had made her a promise, a real promise. Everything was going to be better now, except it wasn't. Vivian typed these words into her laptop, tears streaming down her face. It was so painful to remember that night. To remember the hope she had felt. to remember believing that things would change. Because the very next week, everything got worse instead of better. On October 8, 2008, just days after that conversation in the office, SpaceX launched its fourth Falcon 1 rocket from Omelek Island in the Marshall Islands. This was the last chance. If this launch failed, SpaceX would close forever. Vivian and her brothers watched the launch on TV at Mom's house. They held their breath as the rocket lifted off. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, success. The rocket made it to orbit. SpaceX was saved. Vivian thought this meant Dad would come celebrate with them, but he stayed in Texas at the launch site doing interviews and planning the next steps. Then on Christmas Eve 2008, Tesla received emergency funding, $40 million from investors who believed in the company. Tesla was saved too. Dad called on Christmas morning. "We did it," he shouted through the phone. "We saved both companies. This is the best Christmas ever." But he wasn't there to celebrate with his kids. He was at the Tesla factory in Fremont working on the next car model. After that, things got even busier. Tesla started growing fast. SpaceX won a huge contract with NASA worth $16 billion. Dad's companies weren't just surviving anymore, they were succeeding, really succeeding. And with success came more work, more travel, more meetings, more everything. Dad forgot his promise. Or maybe he didn't forget. Maybe he just decided that saving the world was more important than keeping a promise to a 4-year-old. The visits got shorter. The phone calls got rarer. Dad moved to a big house in Bel Air, bigger than Mom's house, but Vivian and her brothers were there less and less. In 2010, Dad married a woman named Tallulah Riley. Vivian was 6 years old and wore a fancy dress to the wedding. Dad smiled in all the pictures, but Vivian noticed he was on his phone during the reception. The marriage lasted 2 years before they divorced. Then Dad and Tallulah got married again in 2013. Then they divorced again in 2016. Through all of it, the marriages, the divorces, the business successes, Vivian and her brothers were shuffled between houses. They had a schedule, some days with Mom, some days with Dad. But even on Dad's days, he wasn't really there. He did try sometimes. Vivian had to admit that. He took them to SpaceX and let them watch rocket engines being tested. He took them to the Tesla factory and let them sit in prototype cars. He created a special school called Ad Astra inside the SpaceX building for his kids and some employees' children. But those weren't the things Vivian wanted. She didn't care about rockets or cars. She wanted what he had promised that night, to be seen, to be heard, to have his attention. Instead, she felt invisible. Her brothers didn't seem to mind as much. They loved the rocket tour and the factory visits. They asked Dad questions about engineering and physics, and his eyes would light up when he answered. Griffin wanted to be an inventor. Kai wanted to be a scientist. Saxon and Damien built robots in their free time, but Vivian built different things. She wrote stories, she drew pictures, she sang songs, and Dad barely noticed. "That's nice, sweetheart," he would say when she showed him a drawing. But his eyes would already be drifting to his phone, to the next urgent email, to the next crisis at work. Vivian kept that SpaceX jacket he had given her. She hung it in her closet and looked at it sometimes, remembering that night, remembering the promise. She told herself that one day, Dad would remember too. One day, he would slow down and really see her again. She held on to that hope for years, through elementary school and middle school and into high school. She held on to it even when it hurt, even when she felt forgotten, because that promise was all she had. It was proof that once, for one night, she had mattered most. That once, her father had chosen her over everything else. She didn't know yet how much she would need that promise. She didn't know that the hardest part of her life was still coming. She didn't know that one day, she would need her father to really see her more than ever before. And she didn't know that when that day came, he wouldn't be able to. By 2012, Vivian was 8 years old and living 2 completely different lives. At Mom's house in Los Angeles, life was normal. Well, as normal as life could be when your father was becoming one of the most famous people in the world. Mom made pancakes on Sunday mornings. She helped with homework. She asked questions about school and actually listened to the answers. Mom's house felt like home. It was smaller than Dad's places, but it was warm, cozy, real. At Dad's house, whichever house he was living in that month, life was like visiting a museum, beautiful but cold, full of expensive furniture that no one was allowed to touch. And Dad was rarely there anyway. The custody schedule said the kids would spend equal time with each parent, but Dad traveled so much for work that his time often meant staying at his house with nannies while he was in another state or country. Vivian remembered one week in 2013 when she was 9. It was supposed to be Dad's week. On Monday, he was in Washington, D.C. meeting with government officials about SpaceX. On Tuesday, he was in Fremont at the Tesla factory. Wednesday, he flew to Florida for a rocket launch at Cape Canaveral. Thursday, he was back in Los Angeles but working until midnight. Friday, he had dinner with the kids, but he was on his phone the whole time. "Dad," Vivian said during that dinner, "I wrote a story at school. My teacher said it was really good. Want to read it?" "That's great, honey," Dad said, not looking up from his phone. "I'm proud of you. But do you want to read it?" "I will, just email it to me, okay? I'll read it later." She emailed it that night. He never mentioned it again. This was the pattern. Dad was proud of them in theory but didn't have time for the details. He loved them in the abstract but couldn't focus on the specific. The only time Dad seemed fully present was when he talked about his work. Then suddenly he had all the time in the world. One Saturday in 2014, Dad took all 5 kids to the SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. The building was huge, like an airplane hangar. Inside, engineers were building rockets right there on the factory floor. "This is the Falcon 9, Dad explained, pointing at a massive white rocket. His voice was excited, alive. "It can carry cargo to the International Space Station. And see that landing leg system? We're developing technology to land the rocket back on Earth so we can reuse it. No one has ever done that before." Griffin and the triplets asked a million questions. How fast does it go? How much fuel does it use? How do you steer it in space? Dad answered every single question. He got down on one knee to look his sons in the eye. He drew diagrams on a whiteboard. He was patient and enthusiastic and completely engaged. Vivian stood to the side, quiet. She had questions too, but not about rockets. She wanted to ask, "Why can you spend hours explaining rocket science but can't spend 10 minutes reading my story? Why do engines matter more than me?" But she didn't ask. She already knew the answer. In 2014, Dad created Ad Astra, a small private school inside the SpaceX building. The name meant "to the stars" in Latin. Instead of traditional grades, students worked on projects and problems. There were no classes in languages or music or art. Everything focused on math, science, engineering, and ethics. Vivian and her brothers attended Ad Astra along with about a dozen other children of SpaceX employees. Dad was so proud of this school. He had designed it himself, created the curriculum, hired the teachers. "Traditional school teaches you what to think," he told the kids on the first day. "Ad Astra teaches you how to think. We're training you to solve the world's biggest problems." Vivian tried hard to love it. She really did. The other kids were excited about coding and robotics. Her brothers thrived there. They built miniature rockets and programmed computers and debated solutions to global warming. But Vivian felt lost. During project time, while other kids designed Mars colonies and electric airplanes, Vivian wrote poems. She sketched portraits of her classmates. She made up stories about people traveling through time. One teacher, Mr. Chen, pulled her aside one day. "Vivian, these are beautiful," he said, looking at her notebook full of drawings and stories. "You have real artistic talent." "Really?" Her face lit up. No one at Ad Astra had praised her work before. "Really? But you know this school is focused on engineering and science." Maybe you could try applying your creativity to those subjects. Perhaps design something, build something." Vivian's smile faded. "I don't want to build things, I want to make art." Mr. Chen looked uncomfortable. "Well, art is important too, but your father created this school to prepare you kids for the future, to solve big problems." "What about my problems?" Vivian thought. "What about the problem of feeling like I don't belong in my own father's world?" She didn't say it out loud. She just nodded and went back to her desk. That night she tried to talk to Dad about it. He had stopped by the house, a rare evening at home. She found him in his office, as always, working on his laptop. "Dad, can I talk to you?" "Sure, sweetheart, what's up?" He kept typing. "I don't think Ad Astra is the right school for me." That got his attention. He looked up. "What do you mean? It's a great school, the best education you could possibly get." "But I don't like engineering. I like art and writing." Dad frowned. "Art and writing are fine hobbies, but you need to learn real skills. Math, science, programming. Those are the skills that will help you change the world." "What if I don't want to change the world? What if I just want to make people feel things, through stories and pictures?" Dad sighed. He closed his laptop and looked at her, but not in the way she wanted. Not like that night in 2008 when he really saw her. This look was disappointed. "Vivian, you're very smart. You could be anything. Why waste that on art?" The word waste hit her like a punch. Her interests were a waste. She was a waste. "Never mind," she said quietly. "Sorry for bothering you." She left the office before he could see her cry. The years blurred together. 2015, 2016. Dad got more famous. Tesla released the Model X, then started working on the Model 3. SpaceX successfully landed a rocket for the first time in history. People around the world called it a miracle. Dad appeared on talk shows and podcasts. He hosted Saturday Night Live. He became a celebrity, not just a businessman. And with every success, he had less time for his children. Vivian saw him on TV more than she saw him in person. She learned about his life from news articles. She found out he had another baby, a son with the musician Grimes from Instagram. She still kept his SpaceX jacket in her closet. Sometimes she would take it out and hold it, remembering that promise from so long ago. She was 12, then 13, then 14, still waiting for Dad to remember. But the waiting was getting harder. Because Vivian was changing in ways she didn't understand yet. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. She felt wrong in her own skin. She felt like she was pretending to be someone she wasn't, and she had no idea how to explain it to anyone, especially not to a father who barely knew her anymore. By 15, Vivian stopped trying to get Dad's attention. She stopped emailing him her stories. She stopped showing him her drawings. She stopped hoping he would remember his promise. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself she didn't need him. But late at night, alone in her room, she still whispered the words he had said to her when she was 4. "I love you exactly as you are." She held on to those words like a life raft, because soon she would need them more than ever. Soon she would discover exactly who she was, and she would need her father to keep that promise, to see her, really see her, exactly as she was. But when that time came, he would fail her in the worst possible way. The first time Vivian realized something was different, she was 12 years old. It was 2016, and she was getting ready for school in the bathroom at Mom's house. She stood in front of the mirror, brushing her teeth, when suddenly she stopped. She stared at her reflection and felt wrong. The face looking back at her didn't feel like hers. The body didn't feel right. She couldn't explain it. She just knew that something was off, like wearing shoes on the wrong feet or a shirt inside out. Uncomfortable, incorrect. She shook her head and finished brushing her teeth. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she was imagining things, but the feeling didn't go away. It got stronger. At 13, Vivian started noticing other things. She hated shopping in the boys section at stores, but she didn't know why. When people called her by her birth name, she flinched. When teachers said gentlemen to address the boys in class, including her, something inside her screamed that they were wrong. She felt like she was living in the wrong life, like she was playing a character in a movie and couldn't break out of the role. At 14, she cut her hair longer. She secretly tried on some of Mom's clothes when no one was home. They felt right in a way her own clothes never did. She looked in the mirror and for just a moment she saw someone who looked like her. Then she panicked and took the clothes off. What was she doing? What was wrong with her? She didn't tell anyone about these feelings. Not Mom, not her brothers, definitely not Dad. How could she explain something she didn't understand herself? Then came 2020, the year the whole world stopped. COVID-19 shut down Los Angeles in March. Schools closed, businesses closed. Everyone was ordered to stay home. Vivian was 16 years old, stuck in her room at Mom's house with nothing to do but think, and think, and think. With nowhere to go and nothing to distract her, the feelings she had been pushing down for years came rushing up. She couldn't ignore them anymore. She couldn't pretend everything was fine. She spent hours on her laptop searching. At first, she didn't even know what to search for. She typed, "Why do I feel like I'm in the wrong body?" The results that came up changed everything. Transgender, gender dysphoria, gender identity. She read article after article. She watched videos of people telling their stories, and with every story, something inside her clicked into place. This was it. This was what she had been feeling. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't broken. She was transgender. She was a girl. She had always been a girl. Her body just hadn't matched who she really was inside. The realization felt like finally solving a puzzle she had been working on her whole life. Relief flooded through her. Finally, she understood herself. But relief quickly turned to fear. What now? What was she supposed to do with this information? She was Elon Musk's child. Her father was one of the most famous people on Earth. He had 35 million followers on Twitter. If she came out as transgender, the whole world would know. The whole world would have opinions about her life. And what would Dad think? She pulled up his Twitter feed on her phone. She scrolled through his posts, jokes about memes, updates about Tesla, plans for SpaceX, and then she saw them, comments about politics and culture that made her stomach hurt. Dad had strong opinions about a lot of things, and lately he had been posting things that worried her. Things about free speech and cancel culture and what he called woke culture. She didn't see anything specifically about transgender people, but the tone of his post scared her. Would he think she was part of this woke culture he seemed to hate? Would he think she was confused or brainwashed? Would he even believe her? Vivian closed her laptop and lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. She remembered that night when she was 4, that promise. "I love you exactly as you are," he had said. "I'll see you, really see you, whoever you turn out to be." She had held onto those words for 12 years. Now she needed them to be true more than ever. For months, Vivian kept her secret. The COVID lockdown stretched on through spring and summer. She spent the time researching, learning, understanding herself better. She joined online support groups for trans teenagers. She read books. She watched documentaries. Every piece of information confirmed what she already knew in her heart. She was a girl named Vivian, not a boy with her birth name. But knowing it and saying it out loud were two different things. In November 2020, she finally told her first person, Mom. They were sitting in the kitchen at Mom's house in Los Angeles. It was just the two of them. Vivian's brothers were at Dad's house that week. The timing felt right, even though Vivian's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. "Mom," her voice shook. "I need to tell you something important." Justine looked up from her coffee. "What is it, honey?" Vivian took a deep breath. "I'm transgender, I'm a girl, my name is Vivian." The words hung in the air. Vivian watched her mother's face, terrified of what she would see there. Disgust, disappointment, anger. Instead, Mom's eyes filled with tears. She stood up and wrapped Vivian in the tightest hug. "Thank you for telling me," Mom whispered. Thank you for trusting me with this. I love you so much, Vivian." Vivian started crying. "You're not mad." "Mad? Sweetheart, no. I'm honored that you told me. This is who you are, and I love exactly who you are." Those words, the same words Dad had said 12 years ago, but Mom meant them. Mom was here holding her, accepting her, seeing her. They talked for hours that night. Mom asked questions, good questions, caring questions. What pronouns did Vivian want to use? How long had she known? What did she need? How could Mom help? "I want to start hormones eventually," Vivian said. "And I need to tell Dad, but I'm scared." Mom's face grew serious. "What are you scared of?" "That he won't understand. That he'll be disappointed. That he'll think I'm doing this for attention or because of something I read on the internet." Vivian wiped her eyes. "He made me a promise when I was little. He said he would see me for who I really am, but I don't think he even remembers saying that." "Tell him anyway," Mom said gently. "Give him the chance to keep that promise. Maybe he'll surprise you." Vivian wanted to believe that. She really did. She waited almost a year before telling Dad. She needed time to be sure, time to practice saying the words, time to build up courage. By late 2021, Vivian was 17. She had been living as herself, at least at Mom's house and online. She used the name Vivian with friends who knew. She wore clothes that felt right. She was slowly becoming the person she had always been inside, but Dad still didn't know. Their relationship had grown even more distant. He had moved to Texas, to a small house near the SpaceX facility in Boca Chica. He was building Starship, the massive rocket that would supposedly take humans to Mars. He was also fighting with politicians and posting controversial things on Twitter almost every day. Vivian saw him maybe once every 2 months. Quick visits, awkward conversations. Dad on his phone, Dad distracted, Dad somewhere else even when he was sitting right there. She almost didn't tell him. What was the point? He barely knew her as she was. How would he handle knowing the real her? But she had to try. She had to give him the chance to keep that promise from 2008. Even if it had been 13 years, even if he had forgotten, she had to try. In December 2021, she flew to Austin, Texas, where Dad was living. She stayed at his house, a small, strange place that didn't look like a billionaire's home. It was almost empty. No decorations. Just a few pieces of furniture and walls covered with plans for rockets and factories. On her second night there, she asked Dad if they could talk, just the two of them. They sat in his sparse living room. Dad looked tired. He was working on buying Twitter, dealing with Tesla production problems, and pushing Starship development. He had the weight of the world on his shoulders as always. "What's up?" he asked, already half focused on his phone. Vivian's hands shook. This was it. The moment she had been preparing for. The moment that would determine everything. "Dad, I need to tell you something important about who I am." He looked up from his phone. "Okay. I'm transgender. I'm a girl. I want to be called Vivian and use she/her pronouns." The words were out, she had said them. Now she waited. Dad stared at her. His expression was unreadable. The silence stretched on forever. Finally, he spoke. And what he said shattered Vivian's heart into pieces so small she didn't know if she could ever put them back together. "This is just a phase," Dad said. His voice was flat, cold. "You've been spending too much time on the internet. This is what happens when kids read too much social media." Vivian felt like she'd been slapped. "It's not a phase. I've felt this way for years." "Years?" Dad shook his head. "You never mentioned anything before. This is coming out of nowhere." "I was scared to tell you. I didn't know how you'd react." "Well, I'm reacting by telling you the truth." Dad set his phone down, but not in a good way, not in a caring way. He set it down like he was preparing for an argument. "This whole transgender thing, it's a social contagion. Kids see it online and think it's trendy. It's not real." "It is real for me." Vivian's voice rose. "This is who I am, Dad. I've known something was different about me since I was 12. "You're 17. You're confused. Teenagers are always confused about who they are. I'm not confused. Yes, you are. Dad's voice got harder. And I'm not going to support something that I think is harmful to you. This is the woke mind virus infecting kids, making them think they're something they're not. Vivian stood up. Her whole body was shaking. Do you remember what you told me when I was 4, in your office in 2008? Dad looked confused. What are you talking about? You made me a promise. You said you would always see me for who I really am. You said you'd love me exactly as I am. I do love you. No, you don't. Tears poured down Vivian's face. You love the version of me that you want, the one who likes rockets and engineering, the one who's exactly like you. But that's not me. I'm telling you who I really am, and you won't even listen. I am listening, and what I'm hearing is that you've been influenced by dangerous ideas. Dangerous. Being myself is dangerous. Mutilating your body with hormones and surgery. Yes, that's dangerous. I never said anything about surgery. I just want you to call me Vivian and see me as your daughter. Dad rubbed his face with his hands. He looked frustrated, like Vivian was a problem to solve instead of a person who needed love. I can't do that, he said finally. I can't pretend that you're something you're not. That wouldn't be loving. That would be lying. So you think I'm lying? I think you believe what you're saying, but I also think you're wrong. You're my son, not my daughter. That's biology. That's reality. The word son stabbed through Vivian like a knife. She had been so hopeful coming here, so ready for Dad to finally see her, really see her like he promised. But he couldn't or wouldn't. I shouldn't have told you, Vivian whispered. I'm glad you did, because now we can get you help, real help. Maybe therapy to work through this confusion. I don't need therapy to stop being trans. I need a father who accepts me. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From being happy, from being myself. They stared at each other across the empty living room. The distance between them felt bigger than the room, bigger than Texas, bigger than anything. I think you should go back to your mother's house, Dad said quietly. We can talk more when you've had time to think clearly. I am thinking clearly. For the first time in my life, I'm thinking clearly. But Dad wasn't listening anymore. He had picked up his phone again. The conversation was over. Vivian flew back to Los Angeles the next day. She cried the whole flight. The woman sitting next to her asked if she was okay, but Vivian couldn't answer. How could she explain that her father, the man who was supposed to love her unconditionally, had rejected the most important part of who she was? Mom picked her up from the airport. One look at Vivian's face told her everything. Oh, honey, Mom said, pulling her into a hug right there in the terminal. I'm so sorry. They drove home in silence. Vivian stared out the window at Los Angeles passing by. The palm trees, the traffic, the Hollywood sign in the distance. Everything looked the same, but she felt completely different. Broken. That night, lying in her bed at Mom's house, Vivian made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this. Split between two worlds, two names, two versions of herself. She had to choose, and she chose herself. Over the next few months, Vivian took steps to become legally who she already was inside. Mom helped her find a therapist who specialized in gender identity. The therapist confirmed what Vivian already knew. She was transgender, and transitioning was the right path for her. In early 2022, Vivian started the legal process to change her name and gender marker. California law allowed people 18 and older to do this. She would turn 18 on April 15, 2022. She waited until then. On her 18th birthday, she filed the petition with the Los Angeles County Superior Court. The form asked why she wanted to change her name. Vivian wrote, Gender identity and the fact that I no longer live with or wish to be related to my biological father in any way, shape, or form. Those words were hard to write. They made it real. She was cutting ties with Elon Musk, not just changing her name from his, but publicly stating that she didn't want to be his child anymore. It hurt. Even though he had rejected her, even though he had broken his promise, it still hurt to officially walk away. But what choice did she have? He wouldn't see her as Vivian. He wouldn't use her pronouns. He wouldn't accept her truth. How could she keep being his daughter when he refused to acknowledge who his daughter really was? She took her mother's maiden name, Wilson. Vivian Jenna Wilson, that was her real name now. The name that felt right. The name that matched who she was inside. The court approved her petition in June 2022. It should have been private, just a quiet legal change. But nothing was private when your father was Elon Musk. Somehow, the documents leaked. Within days, news outlets around the world were reporting the story. Headlines screamed, "Elon Musk's transgender daughter cuts all ties." Family drama, Musk's child rejects billionaire father. The daughter Elon Musk lost. Vivian's phone exploded with notifications. Friend requests from strangers. Messages from reporters begging for interviews. Hate mail from people who thought she was ungrateful or spoiled. Support messages from people who understood. It was overwhelming, terrifying. She had wanted privacy, but instead, her most painful moment became public entertainment. Dad didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out at all. His silence hurt worse than his rejection in Texas. At least in Texas, he had been there. He had talked to her even if he said the wrong things. But now, nothing. It was like she had died to him. Maybe she had. Maybe the child he thought he had was dead and he was mourning that loss, but Vivian wasn't dead. She was more alive than she had ever been. She was finally herself. Why couldn't he see that? Vivian tried to move on. She enrolled at UCLA, studying subjects she actually cared about: literature, art, psychology. She made friends who knew her only as Vivian, who had no idea about her famous father. She started hormone replacement therapy and watched her body slowly become what it should have been all along. She built a life that was hers, separate from the Musk name, separate from the rockets and the factories and the billions of dollars. But she couldn't completely escape. Dad was everywhere, on the news, on social media, in conversations. In October 2022, he bought Twitter for $44 billion. Suddenly, he owned one of the biggest platforms in the world, and he used it constantly. His posts became more controversial, more political, and more he talked about woke culture and the woke mind virus that he claimed was destroying society. Every post felt personal. Every comment about transgender issues felt like he was talking about her, even though he never mentioned her by name. In 2023, things got worse. Dad started posting explicitly about transgender topics. He shared articles questioning whether kids should be allowed to transition. He made jokes that his followers laughed at, but that made Vivian feel sick. She tried not to look. She tried to block it out, but it was impossible. Friends would send her screenshots. "Did you see what your dad posted?" They meant well, but every message was a reminder that the man who was supposed to love her was using his massive platform to speak against everything she was. The worst part was reading the comments. Thousands of people agreeing with him, calling transgender people confused or mentally ill, saying that parents should never support their trans kids. Did Dad read those comments? Did he know that people were using his words to justify rejecting their own children? Did he care? Vivian didn't know. They hadn't spoken in over a year. Sometimes, late at night, she would look at that old photo from 2008, the one of her sitting in Dad's office chair. She would remember that night, the promise, the hope, and she would cry for the little girl who believed her father would always see her, who thought love was enough, who didn't know yet that sometimes parents break the promises that matter most. By 2023, Vivian had gotten good at pretending her father didn't exist. She lived in a small apartment near UCLA. The place was tiny, just a bedroom, bathroom, and kitchen that was barely big enough for one person, but it was hers. She had decorated it with art prints she loved and plants that somehow survived despite her forgetting to water them. Her roommate, Maya, was studying biology. Maya had no idea who Vivian's father was. When they first met, Maya had asked the usual questions. Where are you from? What do your parents do? My mom's a writer, Vivian had said. My dad, he works in tech. We don't really talk. That was enough. Maya didn't push. Most people didn't. They assumed it was normal family drama, nothing special. Vivian liked being normal. She liked walking to class and grabbing coffee without anyone recognizing her. She liked making friends based on who she was, not whose daughter she was. At UCLA, she took classes in creative writing and psychology. She joined a support group for transgender students. She volunteered at an art therapy program for kids. These were things that mattered to her. Things that had nothing to do with rockets or electric cars or Mars. She worked part-time at a bookstore in Westwood. The owner, Mrs. Chen, was a kind woman in her 60s who loved books more than anything. She paid Vivian minimum wage and let her take home damaged books for free. You remind me of my granddaughter, Mrs. Chen said one day while they were organizing the poetry section. She's brave like you. Brave, Vivian laughed. I'm not brave. Yes, you are. I can tell. You carry yourself like someone who's fought hard to be themselves. Vivian felt tears prick her eyes. Mrs. Chen didn't know about her father or her transition or any of it, but she saw Vivian anyway, really saw her. Thank you, Vivian whispered. This was the life she was building, small, quiet, real. A life where people loved her for who she was, not for her last name or her father's money. But even in this new life, Dad's shadow followed her. In March 2023, Vivian was studying at a coffee shop near campus when a group of students at the next table started talking about Elon Musk. Did you see his tweet about the new Starship launch? One guy said, showing his phone to his friends. He's a genius, another said. Love him or hate him, you have to admit he's changing the world. I don't know, a girl said. He posts some pretty weird stuff, like that thing about pronouns being a nightmare. Vivian's stomach dropped. She knew that tweet. Dad had posted it weeks ago, making fun of people who cared about using correct pronouns. The post had gotten millions of views. That was hilarious, the first guy laughed. People are so sensitive these days. Vivian wanted to scream. She wanted to tell them that pronouns weren't a joke. That for people like her, being called by the right name and pronouns was about being seen as human. That Dad's joke had real consequences for real people, but she said nothing. She packed up her laptop and left. The hardest days were holidays. Thanksgiving 2023. Vivian spent it at Mom's house with her brothers. Griffin was there and the triplets, Kai, Saxon, and Damien. They were all teenagers now, growing up fast. Her brothers knew about her transition. Griffin had been supportive from the start, calling her Vivian without hesitation. The triplets had taken longer to adjust, but they tried. They messed up sometimes with pronouns, but they apologized and got better. Have you talked to Dad lately? Griffin asked during dinner. The table went quiet. Everyone knew this was dangerous territory. No, Vivian said. Have you? Last week. He's busy with the Twitter stuff. He barely asked about school or anything. Kai rolled his eyes. Same as always, he only cares about work. That's not fair, Saxon said. He's trying to help humanity. That's important. More important than his own kids? Vivian asked quietly. Saxon didn't have an answer for that. After dinner, Griffin found Vivian alone in the kitchen. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know, she admitted. Some days I'm fine, I've moved on, and then other days. You miss him. I miss who I thought he was, who he promised to be. Vivian wiped her eyes. Remember when we were little and we'd wait for him to come home? Remember how excited we'd get? Griffin nodded. And then he'd walk in on his phone, barely notice we were there. But sometimes, just sometimes, he'd put the phone down, he'd play with us, tell us stories, make us feel like we mattered. Vivian's voice cracked. I keep waiting for him to do that again, to put down the phone and actually see me. But he won't, he can't. Maybe one day. No, Vivian said firmly. I need to stop hoping for that, it's not good for me. He made his choice. He chose his beliefs over his daughter. I have to accept that and move on. But accepting it and actually moving on were two different things. Christmas was worse. The family gathered at Mom's house again, but the absence of Dad felt huge. Like a missing tooth you can't stop touching with your tongue. Vivian's younger half-siblings from Dad's other relationships weren't there. She barely knew them anyway. Dad had more kids with different women, complicated families that Vivian couldn't keep track of. She had lost count of how many siblings she actually had. Mom tried to make the day special. She cooked a big meal and bought thoughtful gifts, but everyone could feel the sadness underneath the celebration. That night, Vivian looked at her phone and saw that Dad had posted on Twitter a photo of him with some of his other kids celebrating Christmas at his house in Texas. He looked happy, smiling. He hadn't texted Vivian, hadn't called, hadn't sent a gift, nothing. She stared at the photo. He had moved on so easily, found new children to focus on. She was replaceable, forgettable. She opened her messages and typed, "Merry Christmas, Dad, I hope you're well." She stared at the words for 5 minutes. Then she deleted them without sending. What was the point? He had made it clear. She wasn't the child he wanted. She wasn't the person he could love. In early 2024, things got even harder. Dad started doing more interviews, and journalists always asked about his family. In one interview that went viral, he talked about losing a son to what he called the woke mind virus. He used her birth name, on camera, in front of millions of people. Vivian watched the clip in her apartment, her whole body shaking with rage and hurt. He had deadnamed her publicly, erased Vivian and replaced her with a person who didn't exist anymore. The comments on the video were brutal. Half the people praised Dad for standing up to the trans agenda. The other half criticized him for being unsupportive, but no one seemed to care about Vivian herself. She wasn't a real person in this conversation. She was just a symbol, a tool for people to use in their political arguments. That night, Maya found Vivian crying on the couch. "What's wrong?" Maya asked, sitting down beside her. Vivian couldn't hold it in anymore. "My dad is Elon Musk." Maya's eyes went wide. "What?" "And he just went on TV and talked about losing his son. Except I'm not his son. I'm his daughter, and I'm not lost. I'm right here. But he can't see me. He won't see me." Maya hugged her tight. "I'm so sorry." "He made me a promise when I was little," Vivian sobbed. "He said he'd always see me for who I really am, but he lied, or he forgot, or he just doesn't care anymore." "That's his loss," Maya said fiercely. "You're amazing, Vivian. If he can't see that, he's the one who's blind." Vivian wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe Dad was missing out, not her, but it still hurt. It hurt so much she could barely breathe. That's when she knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. Dad was telling his version of their story, painting himself as the victim, making her into something she wasn't. It was time to tell the truth, her truth, the real story. It was time to break her silence and remind the world and her father about the promise he made and broke. By spring 2024, Elon Musk wasn't just Vivian's estranged father anymore. He was everywhere, unavoidable, a constant presence in the news, on social media, in conversations she couldn't escape. He had become more than a businessman. He was a cultural icon, a lightning rod. People either worshipped him or despised him. There was no middle ground. Vivian watched from the sidelines as her father became a symbol for things much bigger than himself. To some people, he represented innovation and progress, the genius who would save humanity and take us to the stars. To others, he represented everything wrong with billionaires: too much power, too much ego, too little accountability. But to Vivian, he was just Dad, the man who made a promise and broke it. In April 2024, Dad appeared on a podcast that got 20 million views in the first week. The host asked him about work-life balance and fatherhood. "I have 11 children now," Dad said casually, like he was talking about cars he owned. "It's important to me that humanity continues. We're facing a population crisis. Birth rates are collapsing. We need more kids, not fewer." 11 children. Vivian counted in her head, her and Griffin, the triplets. XAEAXI with Grimes, Exad Dark Cider Rail with Grimes, 3 more with Siobhan Zillies. Yes, 11, but Dad talked about them like a number, a statistic in his argument about population decline, not as individual people with feelings and needs. "Do you see your kids often?" the host asked. "As much as I can," Dad said, "but I'm also running multiple companies. Tesla, SpaceX, X, which is what Twitter is called now, Neuralink, the boring company. It's a lot. My kids understand that the work I'm doing is important for their future, for everyone's future." Vivian threw her phone across the room. He had time to do a 3-hour podcast, but he couldn't send her a single text on her birthday. He could explain his population theories to millions of strangers, but he couldn't have one honest conversation with her. She called Griffin. "Did you hear Dad's podcast?" "Yeah," Griffin sighed. "He made it sound like we're all on board with never seeing him. We're not numbers in his population argument. We're people. We needed a father, not a mission statement." "I know, but that's who he is, Vive. He's always going to choose the big picture over the details, and we're the details." That hurt, but it was true. They were footnotes in Dad's story about saving humanity. In May 2024, Dad visited the US-Mexico border in Eagle Pass, Texas. He live-streamed himself walking around, talking about immigration policy. The video went viral. Vivian watched it on her laptop in her apartment. There was Dad, wearing his usual plain t-shirt and jeans, surrounded by cameras and security. He looked concerned and serious as he discussed border security and asylum seekers. She wondered if he put that much thought into his own children, if he strategized about how to reach them the way he strategized about business and politics. The comments on the video were predictable. Thousands of people praising him for telling the truth. Thousands more attacking him for various reasons. Everyone had an opinion about Elon Musk. But Vivian just saw a dad who flew to Texas to make a political statement but couldn't fly to Los Angeles to have coffee with his daughter. June 2024 brought the Starship launch. The massive rocket, the biggest ever built, launched from Boca Chica, Texas. It was supposed to be a test flight and parts of it worked. Parts of it failed. But Dad declared it a success anyway. Vivian watched the launch on TV at a bar near UCLA. She was there with Maya and some other friends. When the rocket lifted off, the whole bar cheered. Even people who hated Dad's politics had to admit the rocket was impressive. "That's incredible," Maya said. "Imagine going to Mars on that thing." "My dad built that," Vivian said quietly. The words felt strange in her mouth. "Your dad is literally changing the world," Maya said. "That must be, I don't know, weird." "It's weird," Vivian agreed. "He can build a rocket to Mars, but he can't figure out how to love his daughter. You'd think one would be harder than the other." Maya squeezed her hand. Vivian thought about all those nights when she was little watching rocket launches on TV with Dad. He'd been so excited, so full of dreams. She'd wanted to share his excitement, but all she really wanted was his attention. Now he had his rocket. His dream was coming true. But what about her dreams? What about the little girl who just wanted her father to keep his promise? By mid-June, Vivian had made her decision. She was going to speak out. She was going to tell the truth. But she was terrified. Dad had 180 million followers on X. He had fans who would defend him no matter what. He had resources beyond imagination. What if he came after her? What if he used his platform to discredit her? What if no one believed her? She talked to Mom about it. They sat in Mom's backyard in Los Angeles, drinking tea under the afternoon sun. "I'm scared," Vivian admitted. "What if I tell our story and everyone attacks me? What if they say I'm ungrateful or spoiled, or doing this for attention?" Mom was quiet for a moment. "Those things might happen," she said honestly. "Some people won't understand. Some people will judge you. But other people who have felt invisible like you have, they'll understand. They'll hear you. And maybe, just maybe, your father will hear you too." "He won't," Vivian said. "He's made that clear." "Maybe not right away, but Vivian, that promise he made you, you remember it. You've held onto it for 16 years. That means something. That moment was real. Maybe he needs to be reminded." "I shouldn't have to remind him." "No, you shouldn't. But you made a promise too, remember? You promised to remind him if he forgot what mattered most. Maybe this is how you keep your promise." Vivian hadn't thought about it that way. She had made a promise too, a 4-year-old's promise, but still. "What if telling the truth makes everything worse?" she asked. "What if staying silent makes it worse?" Mom countered. "You're carrying this pain, this anger, this hurt. It's eating you up inside. Maybe speaking your truth will help you heal, regardless of how he responds." Vivian knew Mom was right. The silence was destroying her. Every time Dad went on TV or posted online, every time someone asked her about her father, every time she had to pretend everything was fine, it all added to the weight she was carrying. She needed to put it down. She needed to tell the world what really happened. Not the sanitized version in news articles. Not the speculation from strangers online. The real story. That night, Vivian sat at her desk and began to write. She wrote about Nevada, the brother she never met whose death shaped everything. She wrote about growing up invisible in a house full of everything except attention. She wrote about Ad Astra and feeling like a disappointment because she loved art instead of engineering. She wrote about realizing she was transgender, about the fear and the courage it took to tell people, about Mom's acceptance and Dad's rejection. And she wrote about that night in October 2008, the promise. The moment that had given her hope for years. The moment Dad seemed to have completely forgotten. Tomorrow she would post it. Tomorrow she would break her silence. Tonight she would finish her story and prepare for whatever came next. She looked at that old photo one more time. 4-year-old her sitting in Dad's chair smiling. So innocent, so hopeful. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered to the little girl in the picture. "You deserved better. You deserved to be kept." Tomorrow the world would know the truth. June 21, 2024. The day Vivian would change everything. She woke up early, her stomach in knots. Her laptop sat on her desk, the document still open from the night before. Thousands of words, her entire story, the truth she'd been holding inside for so long. But she wasn't ready to post it yet. Because last night, scrolling through the news before bed, she'd seen something that made everything worse. Dad had done another interview. This one with a conservative commentator, and he'd talked about her again. Vivian pulled up the video on her phone. She'd watched it 3 times already, and each time it hurt more. "You had a son who transitioned," the interviewer said. "That must have been difficult." Dad nodded, his face serious. "I lost my son, essentially. They call it dead naming for a reason. The son I knew is gone." Vivian's hands shook as she watched. "It happened because of what they're teaching in schools," Dad continued. "This ideology that confuses children. My son was doing well, happy, and then suddenly he's convinced he's transgender. I was tricked into signing documents. I didn't understand what I was signing. They said my son might commit suicide if I didn't. That's how they pressure parents." Vivian paused the video. Every word was wrong. Every word was a lie. She hadn't been doing well. She'd been miserable, pretending to be someone she wasn't. She hadn't been convinced by anyone. She'd figured it out herself after years of feeling wrong in her own skin. And Dad hadn't been tricked. He'd been told the truth, and he'd chosen not to believe it. The video continued. "It's evil," Dad said. "What they're doing to children with this trans stuff, it should be illegal." I vowed after that to destroy the woke mind virus. That's one of the reasons I bought Twitter. Now X, we need to stop this contagion. The interviewer nodded sympathetically. "And you haven't spoken to your child since?" "No, I'm mourning the loss of my son, but I'm also fighting to make sure this doesn't happen to other families." Vivian closed the video. She couldn't watch anymore. Dad had turned her into a weapon, a story he told to justify his beliefs, a tragedy he used to gain sympathy and support. He wasn't just rejecting her, he was building a crusade around that rejection. And the worst part, he was lying, making himself the victim, acting like he tried to support her but was tricked and deceived, acting like she was a confused child instead of a 20-year-old adult who knew exactly who she was. She looked at her document again, at the story she'd written, at the truth. This was her breaking point. She couldn't let him control the narrative anymore. She couldn't let him erase her reality and replace it with his fiction. At 9 in the morning, Vivian called Mom. "I'm doing it today," she said. "I'm posting everything." "Are you sure you're ready?" Mom asked gently. "No, but I can't wait anymore. Did you see his interview?" "I saw it. I'm so sorry, honey. He's telling everyone I was tricked, that he was tricked. None of it is true, Mom, none of it." "I know. So I have to tell the real story, before his version becomes the only version people believe." Mom was quiet for a moment. "Okay, then do it. Tell your truth. I'm proud of you, Vivian." After hanging up, Vivian called Griffin. "I'm going public today," she told her twin brother, "with everything. The promise from 2008, Dad's rejection, all of it." Griffin exhaled slowly. "Are you ready for what comes next? It's going to be big, really big." "I know, but I can't stay quiet anymore. He's out there lying about me, about what happened. I need people to know the truth." "Then I support you. Whatever you need, I'm here." "Thanks, Griff." "Hey, Vive. I remember that night, in 2008. I was too young to understand what was happening, but I remember Dad crying. I remember him being different for a little while after that. More present. It didn't last, but it was real." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "So I'm not making it up. He really did promise." "He really did, and you're not crazy for holding on to that. You're not crazy for expecting him to keep it." At 2 in the afternoon, Vivian sat on her couch with her laptop. Maya had gone to class. The apartment was quiet. It was time. She opened social media and created a new thread. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. She took a deep breath and began. "I want to tell you something about my father that no one talks about." The words appeared on the screen. Already they felt powerful, true. She continued typing, pouring out the story she'd written the night before. She wrote about Nevada, about growing up invisible, about the divorce, about that night in October 2008 when Dad made his promise. "In 2008, when I was 4 years old, my father made me a promise. It was October and his life was falling apart. Tesla was almost bankrupt. SpaceX had just failed for the 3rd time. He was divorcing my mom. He had lost almost everything. That night, I found him crying in his office. I had never seen him cry before. I climbed into his lap, and he made me a promise that I held onto for years. A promise that gave me hope when I came out as transgender. A promise that broke my heart when he couldn't keep it." Vivian paused. This was it. Once she posted this, there was no taking it back. She thought about 4-year-old her sitting in that big leather chair. She thought about the hope in that little girl's heart. The belief that Daddy would always love her, always see her, no matter what. That little girl deserved to be heard. That little girl's story deserved to be told. Vivian hit post. The words went live. She continued typing, adding more to the thread. She wrote about Ad Astra, about feeling like a disappointment, about realizing she was transgender, about coming out to Dad and his cold rejection. She wrote about watching him on TV, using her dead name, lying about what happened. She wrote about the pain of being erased by your own father. And then she wrote the most important part. My father says he lost his son, but he didn't lose anyone. I'm right here. I've always been here. What he lost was the imaginary version of me that he wanted me to be. He couldn't or wouldn't see the real me, the daughter standing right in front of him. He made me a promise when I was 4 years old. He promised to see me, really see me, exactly as I am. I held on to that promise through everything. It's the only reason I had the courage to tell him my truth. But when I did, he broke that promise. He chose his beliefs over his daughter. He chose his crusade over his child. I'm breaking my silence today because I can't let him control the narrative anymore. I can't let him tell the world his version while I stay quiet. This is my story. This is my truth. And Dad, if you're reading this, I remember. Even if you don't, I remember what you promised me that night. I remember who you said you would be. I'm still waiting for you to be that person. I'm still waiting for you to see me. Vivian's tears fell onto the keyboard as she typed the final words. She added a few more posts describing her life now, her journey, her healing. Then she set down her phone. It was done. The truth was out there. Within seconds, notifications started flooding in. Likes, shares, comments. Her phone buzzed constantly, an endless stream of reactions. Vivian turned off the sound and closed her laptop. She couldn't look at the responses yet. She needed a moment to breathe, to process what she'd just done. She walked to her window and looked out at Los Angeles. Somewhere in this city, in the house she grew up in, were the ghosts of who she used to be. The little girl waiting by the door, the teenager trying to be someone she wasn't, all the versions of herself that had led to this moment. And somewhere in Texas, in a mansion she'd never visited, her father's phone was probably exploding with notifications. He would see what she wrote. He would read about that night in 2008. The question was, would he remember? Would he care? Would he finally see her? Or would he do what he'd always done, ignore the uncomfortable truth and focus on something else? Vivian didn't know, but at least she'd done her part. She'd told the truth. She'd kept her promise to that 4-year-old girl who said she'd remind Dad what mattered most. Now it was his turn. The ball was in his court. All she could do was wait. Before we continue with what happened after Vivian posted her truth, we need to go back. Back to that night in October 2008. Back to the moment that shaped everything, because this is the heart of the story. This is what Vivian has been holding onto for 16 years. This is the promise. October 23, 2008. Bel Air, Los Angeles. 4-year-old Xavier Musk, who would one day become Vivian, couldn't sleep. The nightmare had been about monsters, the scary kind with big teeth that chased you through dark hallways. Xavier woke up crying, calling for Mommy, but Mommy wasn't home. The nanny, Maria, was downstairs watching TV. Xavier could hear the sound echoing through the big, empty house. Xavier didn't want Maria. Xavier wanted Mom or Dad, but Mom had gone out with her friend tonight, something about needing to get out of the house, needing air. And Dad wasn't supposed to be here at all. This was Mom's week with the kids. But then Xavier heard something, a sound coming from down the hall. From Dad's old office, the one Mom hadn't cleaned out yet after the divorce. Xavier slipped out of bed, tiny feet padding across the cold floor. The house was dark except for a sliver of light under the office door. Xavier moved closer and heard it again. Crying. Someone was crying. Xavier pushed open the door and saw something that made no sense. Dad was there, sitting at his desk, and he was crying. Not quiet tears, real crying. His shoulders shook. His head was in his hands. The computer screen in front of him showed numbers and charts, all of them red. "Daddy?" Xavier's voice was barely a whisper. Elon Musk looked up. His eyes were red and wet. He didn't try to hide it or wipe his face. He just stared at his 4-year-old child standing in the doorway. "Xavier, what are you doing awake?" "I had a bad dream. Why are you here? This is Mommy's week." "I know, I needed to get some things from my office." His voice was rough, broken. "What was your dream about?" "Monsters." Xavier walked closer, not scared of Dad's tears, but curious. "Why are you crying? Did you have a bad dream too?" Dad made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Yeah, something like that, except I'm awake." Xavier didn't understand. "Are you sad?" "Yes, very sad." "Why?" Elon looked at his child and seemed to make a decision. Instead of brushing off the question like he usually did, instead of telling Xavier to go back to bed, he answered honestly. "Everything is falling apart," he said quietly. "My companies, Tesla and SpaceX, they're running out of money. Tesla is going to die in a few weeks if I can't find more funding. SpaceX just failed to launch a rocket for the 3rd time. We're out of chances. If the next launch fails, SpaceX dies too." Xavier climbed up onto the chair. It took effort because the chair was so big, and looked at the computer screen. Red numbers, graphs going down instead of up. "What does that mean?" Xavier asked. "It means I'm losing everything. All the money people gave me to build these companies, all their trust, everything I've worked for." Dad's voice cracked. "Your mother and I are divorced. I barely see you kids. I've been working 20 hours a day, sleeping at the factory, missing your lives. And for what? So I could fail anyway." "You're not going to fail, Daddy. You're smart." "Being smart isn't enough sometimes." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I made a choice. Years ago, after your brother Nevada died, I decided to work on things that mattered, really mattered. Electric cars to save the planet, rockets to make humanity multiplanetary. Big things, important things." Xavier nodded, not really understanding but wanting to. "But I forgot something," Dad continued. His voice got quieter. "I forgot that while I was trying to save humanity's future, I was missing my own children's present. You're growing up and I'm not here. Griffin, Kai, Saxon, Damien, all of you. I'm missing everything." "You're here now," Xavier said simply. "Only because I came to get some papers. Only because I'm too stressed to sleep. Not because I made time for you." He looked at Xavier, really looked, and his eyes filled with fresh tears. "Do you know how many nights I've missed putting you to bed? How many mornings I wasn't there for breakfast? How many times I've said I'm too busy when you wanted to show me something?" Xavier did know, but hearing Dad say it out loud was different. "I'm so sorry," Dad whispered. "I'm sorry for being absent, for choosing work over you, for making you feel like rockets and cars matter more than you do." Xavier didn't know what to say, so Xavier just climbed fully into Dad's lap and hugged him. Dad hugged back tight, like he was holding onto something precious that might slip away. They sat like that for a long time. Xavier could feel Dad's heartbeat, fast and hard, could feel him taking deep breaths, trying to calm down. "Xavier," Dad said finally. "Yeah. I want to make you a promise. Can I do that?" "Okay." Dad pulled back just enough to look at Xavier's face. His own face was still wet with tears, but his eyes were focused now. Present. Really there in a way they usually weren't. "I promise you, no matter what happens with Tesla or SpaceX, no matter how famous I might become or how busy I get, no matter what changes in my life, I will always make time to really listen to you, to really see you, to really pay attention to who you are." Xavier's eyes got big. "Really?" "Really? Because I realized something tonight. I could lose the companies and lose all my money, and that would hurt. But if I lose my children, if you all grow up and I don't know you, if you become strangers to me because I was never there, that would destroy me." That would be the real failure. But your work is important, Xavier said, repeating what Dad always said. It is, but you're more important. You and your brothers, my children, that's what matters most. Not rockets, not cars, not money or fame or changing the world. You. Xavier felt something warm spread through his chest. You mean it. I mean it with all my heart. Dad's voice was firm now, sir. I promise to see you, really see you. Not the version of you I want you to be, but exactly who you are. Even if you're different from me. Even if you don't like the things I like. Even if you grow up to be someone completely unexpected. What if I don't like rockets? Xavier asked. Then that's okay, I'll love you anyway. What if I like art instead of science? Then I'll come to every art show and be the proudest dad there. What if I'm really different? Like, really, really different? Dad smiled, a sad but genuine smile. Then I'll love you even more for being brave enough to be yourself. That's what the promise means, Xavier. I'll see you, the real you, whoever that turns out to be. And I'll love that person no matter what. Xavier threw arms around Dad's neck. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, so much. Dad held Xavier close. Will you help me keep this promise? Sometimes adults forget what's important. We get busy and distracted and we forget. If I forget, if I stop paying attention and start putting work first again, will you remind me? I promise, Xavier said seriously. I'll remind you. Good, because this is a real promise, father to child, the most important promise I've ever made. Dad kissed Xavier's forehead. I love you exactly as you are, right now in this moment, and I'll love you exactly as you are in the future, whoever you become. Never ever forget that. I won't forget, Xavier whispered. They sat together in that office for another hour. Dad didn't check his phone once. He told Xavier stories about growing up in South Africa, about his own father who had been cold and distant, about mistakes he'd made. My father never really saw me, Dad said quietly. He saw what he wanted me to be, but not who I actually was. I don't want to be like that with you kids. I want to be different, better. You will be, Xavier said with the absolute certainty that only a 4-year-old can have. Dad smiled. I hope so. I'm going to try. That's all I can promise, that I'll really try. Eventually, Xavier fell asleep in Dad's arms. When Xavier woke up the next morning, it was in bed, tucked in carefully. Dad's SpaceX jacket, the one he always wore, was draped over the chair like a blanket. Xavier held the jacket and smiled. Dad had kept his promise already. He'd stayed, he'd been present, he'd really been there. Everything was going to be better now. Dad was going to change. He was going to make time. He was going to see Xavier, really see Xavier forever. 4-year-old Xavier believed this completely. Had no reason not to. The promise was real. Dad had meant every word. What Xavier couldn't know was that just 6 days later, on October 29, everything would change. SpaceX's fourth Falcon 1 rocket would successfully reach orbit. The company would be saved. And 2 months after that, on Christmas Eve, Tesla would secure emergency funding and survive too. Dad's companies would be rescued. His dreams would come true. And in the rush of success and growth and endless new opportunities, that promise made on the worst night of his life would fade. Not immediately. For a little while, Dad tried. He came home more, he asked questions, he was present, but slowly, gradually, the old patterns returned. The phone calls during dinner, the missed birthdays, the distracted conversations. And by the time Xavier figured out the truth, that the promise had been forgotten, it would be too late. The hope would already be planted too deep to dig out. That hope would sustain Xavier through years of feeling invisible, through becoming Vivian, through gathering the courage to come out. That promise was why it hurt so much when Dad rejected her, because he hadn't just rejected who she was. He'd broken a vow made on his darkest night, when he was most honest, most vulnerable, most human, and Vivian had never forgotten. Now, 16 years later, she had reminded him. Just like she promised she would. Within an hour of Vivian's post, the internet exploded. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing, hundreds of notifications per minute, then thousands. Her story was spreading like wildfire across every social media platform. Vivian sat on her couch, staring at her phone screen as the numbers climbed. 10,000 shares, 50,000, 100,000. People were reading her words, her pain, her truth. The comments started pouring in immediately. This is heartbreaking. No child should feel invisible to their parent. Elon Musk is a terrible father. All the money in the world can't make up for this. She's just doing this for attention. Typical spoiled rich kid. Thank you for sharing your story. My father rejected me too when I came out as trans. You're not alone. This is what happens when parents don't set boundaries. Kids get confused and think they're trans. That promise from 2008, my heart is broken. She held on to that for 16 years. The responses were everything Vivian had feared and hoped for. Support and hatred, understanding and judgment, compassion and cruelty. News outlets picked up the story within 2 hours. CNN, BBC, The New York Times, The Guardian. Headlines appeared everywhere. Elon Musk's daughter breaks silence about broken promise. Vivian Wilson reveals heartbreaking story of rejection. The promise Elon Musk made and forgot. Major websites wrote full articles analyzing her posts, quoting her directly, discussing the broader implications about parenting, transgender rights, and billionaire family dynamics. By evening, Vivian's story was the #1 trending topic worldwide. Millions of people were reading about that night in 2008, about the promise, about her pain. Maya came home from class around 6. She found Vivian still sitting on the couch, phone in hand, looking overwhelmed. Oh my God, Vivian. It's everywhere. I saw it on the news in the student center. Are you okay? I don't know, Vivian said honestly. I can't stop reading the comments. Some people get it. Some people think I'm lying or exaggerating or just trying to hurt him. Maya sat beside her and gently took the phone away. You need to stop reading. Seriously, you're going to drive yourself crazy. What if I made a mistake? What if this makes everything worse? Or what if you just told the truth and that's enough? You don't owe anyone anything more than that. Vivian's phone rang. It was Mom. Are you okay? Mom asked immediately. I've been watching the coverage. It's massive. I'm scared, Vivian admitted. What if Dad comes after me? What if he denies everything? Then he denies it, but you told your truth. That's what matters. Have you heard from him? No, nothing. But Vivian, your brothers called. They support you. They remember that time period too. They remember Dad being different for a little while after the companies were saved, then gradually disappearing again. That made Vivian feel a little better. At least her brothers believed her. The evening news programs all led with Vivian's story. She watched one broadcast with Maya, listening to anchors discuss her life like she was a character in a story instead of a real person. This raises important questions about parenting in the age of social media, one anchor said. When your parent is one of the most powerful people in the world, how do you make your voice heard? A panel of experts debated whether Vivian should have gone public or kept family matters private. A psychologist talked about the impact of parental rejection on transgender youth. A business analyst discussed how this might affect Elon Musk's companies. It's so weird, Vivian said. They're talking about my life like it's a TV show. That's what happens when your dad is Elon Musk, Maya said. Everything becomes public property. At 8 p.m., celebrity accounts started weighing in. Some defended Elon Musk, saying people shouldn't judge based on one side of the story. Others praised Vivian for her courage. The discourse got louder, messier, more complicated. Vivian's direct messages filled with thousands of notes. Most were supportive, from other trans people sharing their own stories of parental rejection. But some were hateful, from people calling her ungrateful or attention-seeking. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Sarah. "I'm 45 years old. My father made me a promise when I was little too that he'd always be there for me. He broke it. I never told him how much it hurt. I'm proud of you for speaking up. You're braver than I ever was." Vivian read that message 3 times. She wasn't alone. All over the world, people understood this specific pain. The pain of a broken promise. The pain of being unseen by a parent. The pain of holding onto hope for years. By the next morning, the story had grown even bigger. International news outlets covered it. Think pieces appeared in major publications about father-daughter relationships, about transgender acceptance, about the cost of ambition. Vivian's post had sparked a broader conversation. Parents were talking to their kids about promises and presents. Trans youth were sharing their own stories of rejection. Business leaders were discussing work-life balance. But the one voice that remained silent was the one Vivian most wanted to hear. Elon Musk hadn't responded, not publicly, not privately. His Twitter X account posted about a new Tesla model update, about Starship development timelines, about artificial intelligence regulation. Business as usual. He didn't acknowledge Vivian's post, didn't deny it, didn't confirm it, just silence. That silence felt louder than any words. "Maybe he's talking to his lawyers," Maya suggested, "figuring out what to say." "Or maybe he doesn't care," Vivian said quietly. "Maybe I'm just background noise to him now, something his PR team will handle." Griffin called that afternoon. "Have you heard from him?" "Nothing, you." "Nothing. I tried calling him this morning. It went straight to voicemail." "He's avoiding all of us," Vivian realized. "He doesn't want to deal with this." "Or he's figuring out what to do," Griffin said, echoing Maya. "This is huge, Vive. He can't ignore it forever." But Vivian wasn't so sure. Dad had gotten very good at ignoring uncomfortable things. Why would this be different? By day 3, journalists had found Vivian's apartment building. Reporters waited outside, hoping for a comment or a photo. Vivian had to sneak out the back entrance just to go to class. Her professors had seen the news. Other students stared at her in the hallways. She went from being anonymous to being recognized everywhere on campus. "That's her," she heard someone whisper in the library. "Elon Musk's daughter." She wanted to scream that she wasn't his daughter anymore, not really. She was Vivian Jenna Wilson, but people would always see her as an extension of him, wouldn't they? No matter how hard she tried to be separate, his shadow followed her. A literary agent reached out, asking if she wanted to write a book. 3 different documentary filmmakers requested interviews. A lawyer offered to represent her if she wanted to pursue legal action against her father for emotional distress. "I don't want any of that," Vivian told Mom on the phone. "I just wanted him to acknowledge what happened, to admit that he made a promise and broke it. That's all." "I know, honey. Do you think he'll ever respond?" Mom was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Your father. He doesn't handle emotional confrontation well. He never has. He'd rather solve a problem with engineering than have a difficult conversation." "I'm not a problem to solve. I'm his daughter." "I know you are, but I'm not sure he knows how to see that anymore." On day 4, something changed. Vivian woke up to a text from Griffin. "Check ex-Uncle Kimball posted something." Vivian opened the app with shaking hands. Kimball Musk, Elon's brother, had posted a simple message. "Family is complicated. Love is complicated. But kids deserve to be heard by their parents, always." It wasn't much. He didn't mention Vivian by name, but everyone knew what he was talking about. And the fact that someone from the Musk family had acknowledged her story, even indirectly, felt significant. Maybe someone was listening. Maybe someone in that family understood. But still, the one person who mattered most remained silent. Elon Musk said nothing. A week passed. Then two. Vivian's story continued to circulate online, though the initial frenzy had died down. News outlets moved on to other stories. The reporters outside her apartment disappeared. Life started to return to something like normal, except for one thing: Dad still hadn't said a word. Vivian checked his X account every day, even though she knew she shouldn't. She watched him post about Starship launches from Boca Chica, Texas, about Tesla's new Cybertruck production numbers, about his thoughts on artificial intelligence and government regulation. He posted memes. He replied to other tech CEOs. He argued with politicians. He shared updates about Neuralink, his brain-computer interface company, but nothing about her, nothing about the promise, nothing acknowledging that his daughter had shared the most painful story of her life with the entire world. The silence was unbearable. Maybe that's his answer, Maya said one evening as they made dinner in their tiny kitchen. Maybe the silence is him saying he doesn't care. Then why can't he just say that? Vivian chopped vegetables more aggressively than necessary. Why can't he post something like, "My daughter is lying," or "That's not how I remember it," or even no comment? At least that would be something. This nothing is worse. She had imagined so many possible responses: denial, anger, defensiveness, even a lawsuit, but she hadn't imagined this complete radio silence, as if she hadn't spoken at all. It felt like being erased. Again. In early July, Vivian had to go back to work at the bookstore. Mrs. Chen greeted her with a warm hug. "I saw the news," Mrs. Chen said quietly. "You're very brave." "I don't feel brave. I feel invisible." "You're not invisible to the people who matter, to the ones who really see you." Mrs. Chen squeezed her hand. "Your father's silence says more about him than it does about you." Vivian wanted to believe that, but it was hard when the rejection felt so loud. A customer came in that afternoon looking for a book about family relationships. While Vivian was helping her, the woman suddenly looked at her more closely. "Wait, are you that girl, Elon Musk's daughter?" Vivian's stomach dropped. "I prefer not to talk about it." "Oh, I'm sorry, I read your story about the promise. My father did something similar to me, made promises when I was young, then forgot them all when I got older." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for sharing that. It helped me feel less alone." After the woman left, Vivian sat in the back room and cried. This was why she'd spoken up. Not to hurt Dad or get attention, but to tell a truth that other people needed to hear. To help people feel less alone. But why did it still hurt so much that Dad wouldn't acknowledge it? Griffin called one evening in mid-July. "I saw him yesterday." Vivian sat up straight on her couch. "You saw Dad where?" "He was in LA for a Tesla event. I stopped by his hotel. We talked for about 20 minutes. "Did he mention me?" Griffin was quiet for a moment. "No, he didn't bring you up, and I didn't either. I was too scared." "Scared?" "Of what he might say or not say," Griffin sighed. "He seemed tired, Vive, like really tired. He's dealing with a lot. Twitter is losing advertisers. Tesla is having production issues. There's this big fight with the SEC. He looked overwhelmed." "That doesn't excuse ignoring me." "I know. I'm not making excuses. I think he doesn't know what to do. He's built rockets and electric cars and brain chips, but he doesn't know how to deal with emotional stuff, especially when he's the one who messed up. So he just pretends I don't exist." "Maybe. Or maybe he's reading everything you wrote and doesn't know how to respond. Maybe he's ashamed." Vivian wanted to believe that somewhere in Texas, Dad was struggling with what she'd said, that he was thinking about that night in 2008 about the promise he'd made. But wanting to believe something and actually believing it were two different things. Late July brought Vivian's 21st birthday. She spent it with Mom, Griffin, and the triplets at a restaurant in Santa Monica. They had cake and sang "Happy Birthday" and tried to make the day feel special. But there was an empty space at the table, a missing presence that everyone felt but no one mentioned. Her phone stayed silent all day. No text from Dad, no call, no message. By midnight, Vivian accepted that he wasn't going to reach out. Not today, not ever, maybe. She looked at the SpaceX jacket she still kept in her closet. She'd held onto it for 17 years, a reminder of that promise. But now it just felt like evidence of her own foolishness. How could she have believed for so long that he would keep his word? "I should throw this away," she told Mom. "Don't," Mom said gently. "Not in anger. If you're going to let it go, do it when you're ready, when you've healed, not while you're still hurting." In August, Vivian started seeing a therapist. Not because she regretted speaking out, but because she needed help processing the aftermath, the silence, the feeling of being ignored by the one person whose acknowledgement she craved. Why does his opinion matter so much? Dr. Martinez asked during their third session. "You have your mother's support, your brother's support, friends who love you. Why do you need his validation?" "Because he's my father," Vivian said simply. "And he made me a promise. I just want him to admit that he made it and broke it. That's all. I don't even need an apology anymore. I just need him to acknowledge that it happened." What if he never does? That question sat heavy in the room. "Then I guess I have to find a way to let go," Vivian said quietly. "But I don't know how to do that yet." Dr. Martinez nodded. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting that you can't control his response. You told your truth. That took courage. His silence doesn't diminish that courage or make your truth any less valid. Intellectually, Vivian understood, but emotionally it still felt like she was screaming into a void. September came. Vivian returned to UCLA for her junior year. She threw herself into her classes, into her writing, into her art. She tried to build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for Dad to acknowledge her existence. But it was hard. Every time she saw his name in the news, every time someone asked her about him, every time she passed a Tesla on the street, the wound reopened. Her friends threw her a small party to celebrate the start of the semester. They ordered pizza and watched movies and didn't mention Elon Musk once. It was exactly what Vivian needed. That night, lying in bed, Vivian thought about the 4-year-old who had climbed into her father's lap all those years ago. That little girl who had believed so completely in the promise Dad made. "I'm sorry," Vivian whispered to that memory. "I'm sorry he didn't keep it. You deserved better." She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, unaware that the very next day everything would change. Because tomorrow, someone unexpected would knock on her door. Someone from Dad's world. Someone who wanted to bridge the impossible gap between father and daughter. And that conversation would change everything. The knock came at 2 in the afternoon on a Sunday in late September. Vivian was sitting on her couch, working on an essay for her literature class. Maya had gone home to visit her parents for the weekend, so the apartment was quiet. Just Vivian, her laptop, and the hum of the air conditioner. The knock was firm but not aggressive, 3 even taps. Vivian wasn't expecting anyone. She looked through the peephole and saw a tall man with dark hair standing in the hallway. He looked familiar, but she couldn't place him at first. Then it clicked. Kimball Musk, her uncle. Her heart started racing. She opened the door slowly. "Hi, Vivian," Kimball said with a gentle smile. "I hope it's okay that I came by. I got your address from your mom. She said it would be all right to visit." "Uncle Kimball," Vivian's voice came out small, uncertain. "What are you doing here?" "I was hoping we could talk. May I come in?" Vivian hesitated, then stepped aside. Kimball entered the small apartment, looking slightly out of place in his expensive clothes and her budget student housing. "Can I get you something to drink?" Vivian asked automatically, falling back on politeness because she didn't know what else to do. Water would be great, thank you. She poured 2 glasses of water in her tiny kitchen while her mind raced. Why was Kimball here? Had Dad sent him? Was this some kind of intervention? They sat across from each other, Kimball on the couch, Vivian in the worn armchair she'd bought at a thrift store. "I'm sure you're wondering why I'm here," Kimball began. "The thought crossed my mind. I read everything you posted, about the promise in 2008, about how my brother has handled everything." He took a sip of water. "I wanted you to know that I believe you." Vivian felt tears spring to her eyes immediately. "You do?" "Yes, I know my brother. I know how he gets when he's overwhelmed. I know he makes promises with good intentions and then life happens. The companies grow. The pressure increases, and the promises get buried under everything else." "Does he know you're here?" Kimball nodded. "Yes, we talked last week for a long time about you, about what you wrote." Vivian leaned forward. "What did he say?" "A lot of things. He's confused, hurt, defensive, also ashamed, I think, though he wouldn't use that word." Kimball set down his glass. "He read your posts multiple times. The story about that night in 2008, it shook him." "Does he remember it?" "That's complicated. He remembers that time period. He remembers how desperate things were, how close both companies came to dying. He remembers being at your mother's house sometimes during that period, even though it was her custody time, because he was so stressed he didn't know what else to do." Kimball paused, choosing his words carefully. "But the specific conversation, the exact words of the promise, he says he doesn't remember it clearly. He remembers talking to you kids, being emotional, making general promises about being a better father. But he doesn't remember that specific night the way you do." Vivian felt her chest tighten. "So he thinks I'm making it up." "No, that's not what I'm saying." Kimball leaned forward. "Vivian, here's what I told him. It doesn't matter if he remembers the exact words. You remember. You've carried that memory for 16 years. You've held on to that promise like a lifeline. Whether he remembers saying those specific words or not, the impact on you was real. Your pain is real. But if he doesn't remember, then that's part of the problem, isn't it? That he could make such a meaningful promise to his 4-year-old child and then forget it completely. That tells you everything about where his focus has been all these years." Vivian wiped her eyes. "Why are you here, Uncle Kimball? What does he want?" "He wants to talk to you, just the two of you. No lawyers, no PR people, no media. Just a father and daughter trying to have an honest conversation." "I don't know if I can do that. What if he just hurts me again?" "He might," Kimball said honestly. "My brother is not good at emotional conversations. He's brilliant at solving technical problems, but human emotions, those don't follow logical rules, and that frustrates him. He might say the wrong thing. He might not understand everything you need him to understand." "Then why should I subject myself to that?" "Because maybe, just maybe, this is the moment where something changes, where he actually tries to listen instead of defend, where you get to say everything you need to say directly to him, not to the internet." Vivian stood up and walked to her window. Outside, students walked across campus, heading to libraries and dining halls. Normal lives, normal problems. "When I came out to him as trans, he rejected me," she said without turning around. "He called it a phase, said I was confused, blamed it on social media and woke culture. He used my dead name. He made it about his beliefs instead of about me. I know, he told me. And then when I legally changed my name and cut ties with him, he still didn't reach out. He just told interviewers that he'd lost a son. He made himself the victim." "I know that too." Vivian turned to face Kimball. "So why should I believe that this time will be different?" Kimball stood up and walked over to her. Because you shared something with the world that he can't ignore or explain away. You reminded him of who he was in his darkest moment, vulnerable, human, a father who loved his kids more than his companies. Even if he doesn't remember the exact words, he knows that version of himself existed. And I think part of him wants to find that person again. What if it's too late? Maybe it is. Maybe the damage is too deep to fix, but you won't know unless you try. Kimball put a hand on her shoulder. And Vivian, if you talk to him and he fails you again, at least you'll know. You can close that door with certainty instead of always wondering what if. Vivian thought about this. She'd spent months hoping Dad would respond to her posts, months checking his social media, waiting for acknowledgement. Maybe Kimball was right. Maybe sitting down face to face would give her closure one way or another. Where would we meet? She asked. Neutral territory, somewhere private, maybe here in LA. He's willing to fly out whenever works for you. He'd come here, to Los Angeles. Yes, he knows he's the one who needs to make the effort. That surprised her. Dad rarely traveled for personal reasons. His time was too valuable, his schedule too packed, but he would fly to LA for her. I need time to think about it, Vivian said. Of course, take all the time you need. Kimball pulled out his phone. Can I give you my number? When you decide, just text me. No pressure, but I hope you'll consider it. Vivian saved his number. They walked to the door together. Uncle Kimball, she said as he was leaving, thank you for believing me. That means more than you know. He smiled sadly. You're my niece, I love you, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. It took real courage to speak your truth. After he left, Vivian sat on her couch for a long time, thinking. Her phone sat on the coffee table, Kimball's number saved in her contacts. Should she do it? Should she agree to meet with Dad? Part of her wanted to say no, to protect herself, to avoid more potential hurt. But another part, the part that had held onto that promise for 16 years, wanted one more chance. One more opportunity for Dad to see her, really see her, the way he promised he would. She picked up her phone and called Mom. He wants to talk, Vivian said when Mom answered. Uncle Kimball came by. Dad wants to meet, just the two of us. What do you want to do? Mom asked. I don't know, I'm scared. That's understandable. But honey, I'll tell you what I think. You've already done the hardest part. You told your truth. You reminded him of his promise. Now the question is whether you want to hear what he has to say in response. What if it's just more excuses, more blame? Then you walk away knowing you tried everything. But what if it's not? What if this is the moment where he finally listens? Vivian looked at the SpaceX jacket hanging in her closet, that reminder of a 4-year-old's hope. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. I'll meet with him. Are you sure? No, but I'm going to do it anyway. After hanging up, Vivian texted Kimball. I'll meet with him, but I want it to be somewhere that feels safe to me, and I want to be able to leave whenever I want. Kimball replied within minutes. Absolutely. You pick the place and time, he'll be there. Vivian took a deep breath. In a few days, she would sit across from her father for the first time in years. She would look him in the eye and hear what he had to say. It might break her heart all over again. Or maybe, just maybe, it would be the beginning of something new. July 15, 2024, 3 weeks after Kimball's visit, Vivian chose a small, private office space in downtown Los Angeles that Mom's literary agent sometimes used for meetings. It was neutral territory, not Dad's world, not hers, just a quiet room with 2 chairs, a table, and a window overlooking the city. She arrived 30 minutes early, her stomach in knots. She wore simple clothes, jeans, and a blue sweater, and had tied her hair back. She wanted to look put together, but not like she was trying too hard. Maya had offered to come with her and wait outside, but Vivian said no. This was something she needed to do alone. At exactly 2 o'clock, there was a knock on the door. Vivian's heart jumped into her throat. She stood up, smoothed her sweater, and opened the door. Elon Musk stood in the hallway. He looked older than the last time she'd seen him in person. His face was thinner. There were more lines around his eyes. He wore a plain black t-shirt and jeans, the uniform he always wore. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "Hi," he said finally. His voice was uncertain, nothing like the confident tone he used in interviews. "Hi," Vivian replied. Can I come in?" She stepped aside. He entered the small office and she closed the door behind him. The click of the latch felt final, like sealing them in together until this conversation reached its end. They sat down across from each other. The table between them felt like an ocean. Neither spoke for what felt like forever. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure I would either." Another long pause. Dad looked at his hands, then at the window, then finally at her face. Really looked at her. For the first time in years, his eyes focused completely on her. "You look different," he said. "Your hair, everything, you look like yourself." Vivian wasn't sure how to respond to that. "I am myself now, finally." "Right, yes." He shifted in his chair. "I've been trying to figure out what to say to you for weeks. I wrote down things, deleted them, wrote them again. Nothing felt right." "So say what feels true," Vivian said. "Not what sounds good, just what's true." Dad nodded slowly. "Okay, the truth is, I don't remember that night in October 2008 the way you do." Vivian's heart sank immediately. "Wait, let me finish," he said quickly. "I don't remember the exact conversation, the exact words, but I believe you. I believe that's what I said, because 2008 I was drowning. Tesla was dying. SpaceX had failed 3 times. I was divorcing your mother. Everything was falling apart." He rubbed his face with his hands, a gesture she remembered from childhood. "I was having panic attacks. I was sleeping at the factory because I couldn't afford to waste time commuting. I was making desperate phone calls at 3 in the morning, begging people for money. And yes, sometimes I went to your mom's house during her custody time because I didn't know where else to go, because I was falling apart." "So you were there that night," Vivian said. "I must have been. The timeline matches, the emotional state matches. And the things you said I promised, that sounds like something I would say in that moment, when everything else was stripped away and I was just broken. But you don't actually remember saying it." "No, I don't." He met her eyes. "But Vivian, whether I remember the exact words or not, you remember. You've carried that memory for 16 years. You've held onto that promise like evidence of who I could be if I tried. And the fact that I don't remember, that's the problem, isn't it?" Vivian felt tears starting but fought them back. "Yes, that's exactly the problem. I made you a promise that was so important to you that it shaped your entire childhood. It gave you hope when you came out to me, and I forgot it. I didn't even know it existed until you told the whole world about it." His voice got rough. "What kind of father does that?" "I don't know," Vivian said quietly. "You tell me." Dad was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The kind of father I've been. Absent, distracted, so focused on the mission, on saving the planet, on getting to Mars, on building the future, that I forgot about the present, about my kids growing up right in front of me." "You didn't just forget about the present. You forgot about me, about who I really am." "Yes, I did." He didn't try to argue or explain it away. "When you came out to me as transgender, I reacted badly, really badly. I made it about my beliefs instead of about you. I called it a phase and blamed it on social media. I was wrong." Vivian's breath caught. She hadn't expected him to admit that. "I was wrong," he repeated more firmly. You weren't confused. You weren't influenced by social contagion or woke culture or any of the things I said. You were telling me the truth about who you are, and I refused to listen. I refused to see you." Tears were streaming down Vivian's face now. "Do you know how much that hurt? Do you know what it's like to finally understand yourself, to finally be brave enough to tell your father and have him reject the most fundamental part of who you are?" I can imagine, or I'm trying to. Dad's own eyes were wet, but I'm sure whatever I imagine isn't as painful as what you actually experienced. "It felt like dying," Vivian said. "Like the real me was dying and you didn't even care. You just cared about being right, about your political crusade against wokeness or whatever." "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Vivian." He used her name, her real name. For the first time in this conversation, for the first time in years, he called her Vivian. "I've been thinking a lot since you posted your story," Dad continued. "About that version of me from 2008, the one who was vulnerable enough to cry in front of his 4-year-old, the one who knew what really mattered. And I realized I missed that person. He was scared and stressed and failing, but at least he had his priorities straight for a moment." "What happened to him?" "The companies survived, and I forgot. I got caught up in success and growth and all the problems that come with that. And I told myself that the work mattered more than anything else because the work was about saving humanity." He shook his head. "But what's the point of saving humanity if I can't even see my own daughter?" Vivian wiped her eyes. "You really hurt me, Dad." "I know. You broke the most important promise you ever made to me." "I know. And you used my dead name on TV. You told millions of people that you'd lost a son when I was right here. Your daughter, still alive, still trying to be seen by you." "I know that was cruel, it was wrong. I was mourning the child I thought I had instead of celebrating the child I do have. And that's backwards. That's terrible parenting." Vivian looked at him carefully. "Why are you saying all this now? Why couldn't you say it 2 years ago when I first told you? Why did it take me posting my story to the entire world for you to finally listen?" Dad was quiet for a long time. "I don't have a good answer for that. Pride, maybe, or fear. Or I genuinely believed I was right and you were wrong, but reading your words, seeing how many people it resonated with, seeing other trans people thank you for telling your story." He trailed off. "What?" Vivian prompted. "I realized I couldn't keep telling myself you were just confused or going through a phase. This is who you are. This is real. And I've been fighting reality because it didn't match what I wanted." "What did you want?" "I don't know. A son who wanted to be an engineer. A child who was exactly like me. Someone who would take over my companies one day." He shook his head. "But that's not who you are. You're an artist, a writer. Someone who cares about emotions and stories and human connection. You're completely different from me. And that's okay." Dad looked directly at her. "That's more than okay, that's who you are. Vivian Jenna Wilson, my daughter, and I'm sorry it took me so long to see you." The words hung in the air. Vivian felt like she couldn't breathe. This was what she'd wanted for years. This acknowledgement, this acceptance. But now that it was here, she didn't know what to do with it. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said honestly. "Not yet, maybe not ever." "I understand. You hurt me so deeply, and saying sorry doesn't fix that." "I know it doesn't, but I'm saying it anyway because you deserve to hear it. You deserve to be apologized to." He leaned forward slightly. "Vivian, I don't expect you to forgive me today or next week or even next year. I don't expect us to suddenly have a perfect relationship. But I'm asking, can we try? Can we start over? Can I try to be the father I promised to be 16 years ago? How do I know you won't forget again? How do I know you won't go back to Texas and get busy with Starship and Tesla and just disappear again?" You don't know, and honestly I don't know either, but I want to try, I want to do better. He pulled out his phone and did something Vivian had never seen him do before. He turned it completely off, set it on the table between them. I'm here now, he said. Completely here, phone off. No distractions, just you and me. This is what I should have been doing all along. Vivian stared at the phone on the table. It seemed like such a small gesture, but from him it meant everything. His phone was his connection to his companies, to his world, to everything he cared about. And he'd turned it off. For her. I'm listening now, Dad said quietly. Really listening. I know it's late. I know I failed you, but I'm here now. And I see you, Vivian, I see you. For the first time in years, Vivian believed him. They talked for 3 hours that day. Dad's phone stayed off the entire time. Vivian told him everything, about the years of feeling invisible, about discovering she was transgender and the terror of that realization, about the loneliness of being his child but never feeling like he really knew her, about watching him become more famous while becoming more distant. Dad listened, really listened. He didn't check the time. He didn't make excuses. When she cried, he handed her tissues. When she got angry, he let her be angry without defending himself. I need you to understand something, Vivian said near the end. I'm not going to suddenly start liking rockets or engineering. I'm not going to work for Tesla or SpaceX. I'm going to be a writer and an artist. That's who I am. I know, Dad said, and that's wonderful. The world needs artists as much as it needs engineers, maybe more. And I'm going to keep being trans. I'm going to keep being Vivian. This isn't a phase I'll grow out of. I know that too. I was wrong to ever think otherwise. And I'm not coming back to being a Musk. I'm Vivian Wilson now. That's my name. Dad flinched slightly at that, but he nodded. I understand. That's your choice. Though it hurts, I get why you made it. Do you really? Yes, I rejected you. You had every right to reject my name in return. Maybe one day you'll feel differently, or maybe you won't. Either way, it's your decision. Before they ended the meeting, Dad made a request. Can we do this again? Meet like this. Maybe once a month to start. No phones, just talking. Vivian hesitated. I don't know, I need to think about it. Of course, just consider it, please. They stood up. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Dad opened his arms slightly, a question. Vivian stepped forward and let him hug her. It was awkward and tentative, but it was real. Thank you for giving me this chance, he whispered. Don't waste it, she whispered back. Over the next few months, something unexpected happened. Dad kept his word. He flew to Los Angeles once a month. They met at the same office space. Phone off. No assistants, no interruptions. Just father and daughter talking. The conversations were sometimes difficult. They didn't agree on everything. Dad still had opinions that frustrated Vivian. She still had anger that surfaced unexpectedly, but he showed up every single time, even when Tesla had a product launch, even when Starship had a test flight. He rearranged his schedule and showed up. In October, 4 months after their first meeting, they met at a small restaurant instead of the office. It felt less formal. More like they were just two people having dinner instead of father and daughter navigating a minefield. How's school? Dad asked as they looked at menus. Good. I'm taking a creative writing workshop. We're working on personal essays. Are you writing about us? Some. Is that okay? Yes, write whatever you need to write. Your story is yours to tell. They ordered food. Dad asked about her classes, her friends, her life. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He told her about a problem at SpaceX, and when she didn't understand the technical details, he explained them in simple terms instead of getting frustrated. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when Vivian could tell Dad was itching to check his phone. Still times when he said something that revealed he didn't fully understand her experience. Still walls between them built by years of distance, but it was progress, real progress. In December, Vivian invited Dad to her apartment for the first time. She cooked dinner, nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, and they ate at her small table. Dad looked around the tiny space. "This is nice. Cozy. It's small, but it's mine. I pay for it with my bookstore job and Mom's help." "You're not using any of the trust fund." "No, I wanted to do this on my own." Dad nodded slowly. "I respect that. You're independent, strong. You get that from your mother." After dinner, Vivian showed him some of her artwork, paintings and drawings she'd been working on. She was nervous. Art was so personal, and Dad had never been interested in creative things before. But he looked at each piece carefully. "These are beautiful," he said. "You have real talent. You don't have to say that just to be nice." "I'm not, I mean it. This one especially." He pointed to a painting of a girl standing at a window looking out at stars. "There's so much emotion in it. I can feel what she's feeling." "It's me," Vivian said quietly. "When I was little, waiting for you to come home." Dad stared at the painting for a long time. "I'm sorry I made you wait so much." "I know you are." They were quiet for a moment. Then Dad said, "Can I ask you something?" "Okay." "That night in 2008, the promise. Do you remember what I was wearing, what the office looked like, any specific details?" Vivian thought back. "You were wearing a black t-shirt. Your office had a big wooden desk with papers everywhere. There was a lamp that made everything look yellow, and you smelled like coffee and sadness, I guess, if sadness has a smell." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "I remember being in that office. I remember feeling like I'd lost everything. And I remember thinking that my kids were growing up and I was missing it. So yes, I believe I said what you remember. Even if I don't remember the exact words, I remember feeling that way, knowing that I needed to change." "But you didn't change, not for long." "No, I didn't. Success came and I forgot again. I forgot what mattered most." He wiped his eyes. "But I'm trying not to forget now. You reminded me just like you promised you would." Christmas 2024 was different from any holiday Vivian had experienced in years. She spent it at Mom's house with all her brothers. And for the first time since 2008, Dad came too. It was strange having both parents in the same room. They'd been divorced for 16 years, but they were civil, friendly, even, united in their love for their children. Dad brought gifts. For Vivian, he brought a leather journal with her initials embossed on the cover. "For your writing," he said. She opened it and saw an inscription on the first page in his handwriting. "To Vivian, never stop telling your truth. Love, Dad." She hugged him. "Thank you." The day wasn't perfect. Dad still checked his phone a few times. He still talked about work more than anyone else wanted to hear about it. Old habits died hard, but he was there. Present in a way he hadn't been in years. He asked Griffin about college plans. He played a board game with the triplets. He complimented Mom's cooking. And when it was time to leave, he hugged each of his kids goodbye. When he got to Vivian, he held her a little longer. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he whispered. "Thank you for finally showing up," she whispered back. Later that night, Vivian sat in her old bedroom at Mom's house and opened the journal Dad had given her. She thought about everything that had happened since June when she'd broken her silence. The world had reacted in ways she never expected. Some good, some bad. But the most important reaction had been the one that took the longest, her father's. He hadn't given her everything she needed. The hurt didn't just disappear because he apologized. The years of neglect couldn't be erased with a few months of trying. But he was trying, really trying, and maybe that was enough for now. She picked up a pen and began to write in the new journal. "Once upon a time, a little girl climbed into her father's lap and he made her a promise. He broke that promise for many years. But then the girl, now grown, reminded him what he'd said. And slowly, painfully, he started trying to keep it." She paused, then continued. "This isn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It's real life which is messier and harder, but maybe that's okay. Maybe real love isn't about being perfect. Maybe it's about showing up even when it's hard, about trying again even after you've failed. Maybe it's about seeing each other, really seeing each other, even when it takes 16 years to remember how. She closed the journal and looked at the stars outside her window. Somewhere in Texas, Dad was probably looking at those same stars, dreaming of Mars. But tonight, just for tonight, she hoped he was also thinking about Earth, about his daughter, about the promise he was finally learning to keep. That was the end of Vivian and Elon's story, a journey from silence to truth, from broken promises to healing. While their relationship may never be perfect, they found something precious, the courage to try again. We'd love to know, where are you listening from? Drop your location in the comments below. Whether you're in New York, Tokyo, Mumbai, London, or anywhere else in the world, your voice matters to us. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us share these meaningful stories with more people who need to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We bring you emotionally powerful stories like this one every week. Stories about real people, real struggles, and real hope. Finally, share this video with your friends and family. You never know who might need to hear about finding the courage to speak their truth or about the power of second chances. Together, we can spread kindness and awareness, one story at a time. Thank you for listening. Until next time, remember, your voice matters, your truth matters, and you deserve to be seen exactly as you are.